Hello, everyone, and welcome to another show here on Dojo Live this Wednesday, October 5th, 2022. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure to be hosting today, along with America Guerrero.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, America. Nice to join you again.
Yeah.
Of course, the star of today's show and the most important person is Amrinder Arora, CEO at BizMerlinHR. Thank you for joining us, Amrinder.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, America.
Yes, it's our pleasure. And he surprised us. Speaks Spanish very, very well. We learned this in our pre-show chat. And Spanish and English, Amrinder, I love it when people speak many, many languages. I only have like 1.5 under my belt if you count English and Spanish. So that's amazing.
It's fun. I think it's a great way to connect with people. You go anywhere. You go to Poland, you speak some Polish, it's a great, I think it's a great way. After all, it's always people. So I enjoy it. And I think it's a good way.
I absolutely agree with you. Thank you. And I think that leads really well into your business and what you do and the topic that we're talking about today. And that's changing the faces of talent management, coming back to talent being people. But before we get into the topic more in depth, we'd love to learn a bit more about you, multilingual, but what's the rest of your story? What's your passion? What's your history? And what's kind of led up to BizMerlinHR today? Thank you.
So I think my story, like many stories, is perhaps not that unique. We all have, many of us have shared experiences, shared journeys. So I grew up mostly as a technologist. I think most of my career preparation was as a technologist. I studied computer science at undergraduate, graduate, doctorate levels. And then after that, when I entered industry, I was essentially a technologist for a while, being a CTO for a few different companies. And then I also had a stint in the academia. I was a full-time professor for a few years. And then I realized, okay, the pace of the academia was not quite for me. Then I came back to industry and then never looked back. Then I went back to the boardroom, had a great stint of some companies where I was able to make a lot of impact. It was really heartening for me to see on how much impact that you can make with some technical innovations that affects people in their everyday lives, whether it's people just trying to traverse a city, or people trying to get health insurance, all people trying to get their foods into the country, food and products into the country. So I had a few different engagements which really touched me, which really felt like, hey, this is, once you do something like this, you can actually see the impact. You can talk to the people who are directly impacted by this, and you might have a random conversation at a grocery store or somewhere else, and you tell somebody, and they say, oh yeah, I know that product, I use it. Like, oh, you do? Oh, okay. So once you see that, once you have experiences like that, you see that it affects the people in such a fundamental way, and that their lives are better for it. Then I think that's really how it started for me, at least. And this then switching over to the entrepreneurship, that really was my journey. I grew up back in India, moved to the United States in 1990s. And have been here since then. Based in the Northern Virginia corridor. So this is a great place, and I think my journey, in a way, not that unique. I'm sure a lot of people have made similar journeys, but at the same time, some of the experiences that I have had there were quite interesting for me.
Well, thank you for sharing. I do feel that it is an interesting and unique story, to be honest. And I'm also an expat and living in a country that I was not born in. And I think I like to think that makes us, more rounded, more holistic individuals. The more the world, anyone that you get to experience and see, I think the better we are for it. So let's bring it to where you currently are right now with BizMerlinHR. Who are you? What's the problem that you're solving as a company? And I am intrigued by the name BizMerlin. Inevitably, the name Merlin makes me think of the famous wizard. So my question is that intentional?
So that's intentional, and you're probably maybe I would say, I can probably count in single digits people who who make that connection. I think Merlin is maybe more of a wizard in the UK, and in the US maybe Merlin's not that well known as a wizard. But I remember one time I had a conversation just at a filling up a I think I was filling up a gas station or just getting something, and somebody saw the T-shirt, and they asked, "Hey, what is this? BizMerlin HR? What is this? Is this some kind of a wizard for your business, or is it just something that's going to automate all of your HR processes?" And I'm thinking, I should be recording you. You are the spokesperson right there.
Yes.
A random person, with no context and just reading. I'm like, you are the actual reader of T-shirts. Everybody else is just doing something wrong. So it was absolutely hilarious. But that's exactly how we started. When we started focusing on the HR sector, one of the things that we saw was that from the global HRIS perspective, there were the gaps were humongous. People always thought that a global company would be a company that has like 50,000 people. They would need these kinds of systems, et cetera, et cetera. But then, now you see that a company might be global with 600 people. They have global, they have many, 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 complicated requirements. So they might have, let's suppose they have a couple of thousand people, some in the US, some in Mexico, some in Europe, some in Asia. And it's a very common scenario for companies of the nature. So for companies of the nature, we saw that the HR sector, what was the suppliers that were out there, simply were not really handling the complexity that these companies needed. So we started looking at a global HRIS as our go to product here. Initially, what we were trying to do was just trying to fill the niche by thinking, okay, there must be a solution out there. But then when we came to it, we said, okay, there is, and then we started building these things, and we came to that, and we said, okay, these are all the things that are needed to serve this particular customer segment. They have all the complexities of a very large enterprise. At the same time, they're still, a couple thousand people company. They're still not, they're not a 200,000 people Microsoft. So that's how we started. And then the name Merlin came into play because there were so much automations that were needed at the time for if you recall a couple of decades ago, this words of wisdom came to be that every company is now a software company because you had to kind of evolve. And then about 10 years ago, this came to be that every company became an AI company. But by that, what was really meant was that the automations and the intelligence in the system really needed to be at a higher level than was there. So and we started off with my background, my training, my academic work was all in AI. So it was a natural fit for me to think about, okay, we're gonna start about it from the get-go. We snuck the word in Merlin into it to do that. But yeah, really that I think you caught to it. So I'm gonna write your name here in my list of people who really had it right.
You send me a T-shirt, and I'll proudly explain it to anyone that I come across. Perfect. And thank you for explaining. I think even your existence leads in very closely to today's topic of conversation as chosen by you. That topic
is changing faces of talent management. In the post-COVID reality, how is the talent management function evolving, and what role do HR management systems play? So please share with us, Dr. Arora, why this topic is important for today's show.
Great. I mean, Marika, I think you've hit to a topic that's very, very, very current these days. I think people are generally, we're all out of COVID. People have embraced the new reality. We are all saying, okay, the COVID is now done, gone. I've taken so many flights in the last few months that where people have, barring, or when I was entering one airport, they asked, okay, you have to put the mask on at the airport, and then as soon as you exit the airport, you can take it off. And of course, we didn't have it during the flight, so there were so many people, just based on the regulations, etc. So in a way, COVID's over. In a way, COVID's maybe a remnants of it are still there, but in a way, the COVID has changed some of the things that were happening. So I think some of those, okay, maybe hopefully the sicknesses and and most importantly the deaths will go away, but the changes that it made in all of us some of it are going to be felt in multiple ways here. Sorry, Kim, did you have a point?
No, I was just agreeing with
I
you.
agree.
Thank you.
For those of you listening to us only, I was moving my finger and I was saying, yes. Please continue.
So in that sense, what we see is that the CHROs, the one that I interact with, they were like, they ask these questions, and in a way, I can ask this question back to them. So they are usually the ones who usually ask have the answers. But still, this question is very current for them. Hey, how is this talent management thing really changing in the post-COVID world? What's happening? And there are some. And the answer to that, first of all, and I know America, there was a second part to that about HR tech. I'll come to that later. But if you just focus on COVID, people understand that after all, nothing about talent management changed fundamentally. At a strategic level, at the intrinsic level, it didn't really change. But from a delivery perspective, from an execution perspective, it got transformed. So depending on who you ask, they're like, oh, no, it's the same, or like, my goodness, it's totally different. Just depends upon whether they are working on the underlying layer, coming up with a strategy, or they are actually working with the logistical nature of it. For example, if they have to do things on the employee engagement side, what they were able to do on the employee engagement side in the office here is entirely different from what they're going to be able to do in a virtual environment, where maybe out of their 150 team members here that they're working with in the department, maybe 60 of them have not even met the other people. There's so many people who haven't even met because they're hired remote. Maybe you have a small office in Chile that's working, that's not really very well integrated. So things of that nature, the logistical nature, changed quite drastically. People are now embracing the reality of there will be some hybrid environments, some online environments only. So that's changing quite a bit. Now, besides that, not only the fact whether people are in the office or at home, but the other than that, people's career aspirations also changed somewhat on what they're going to be able to do based on some of their other realities that they were facing in their lives. So to adjust to that, some of their career aspirations also changed. And then there came the brand new thing that with the COVID or pandemic in general, or rather if we generalize that to a disruption in general, they came to what should be really the talent streams that people should be focusing on. Even that has changed. So again, yes, in some aspects it didn't change at all. The function of talent management, of course, always was and always remains to be able to make sure that the people and their strengths and their talent and the growth is aligned with your overall business objectives, so that you can best meet your business objective. That remains the same, but what you have to specifically do within that has quite changed.
Yeah,
And there's a second part to their question. Okay, so you're asking about HR technology there, right? How the HR technology. Now, from our perspective, from a BizMerlin HR perspective, of course, this is the part where we are involved with them much more, our CHROs, because they look to us from providing to them the HR technology. So one of the things that we observed was, this is back in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, but one could say that some of these things were already happening even prior to that. For example, the performance reviews that were changing from being very structured, people having much more flexible check-ins here. So we see from our customer base, the customers that embraced check-ins back in 2019, 2020, to the ones that are still embracing check-ins today, that are, so far have been using, sort of what we might call legacy or traditional performance reviews, and to the ones that actually moved to check-in. So that when we launched those modules, they had a big impact on the people who were using them. And similarly, one of the things that we had, this was for a long time ago, the continuous performance management, the real-time feedback, the awards, the gift cards, etc. BizMerlin HR always had them for a long time, and they got a big uptick. So with that, we were able to serve the customers quite well, because those modules were there and those modules were ready for the people to use in the changing. But here also, I'm only talking about one aspect of talent management. Talent management is itself quite broad. when we say talent management, many times people ask me what's talent management, and I'm often reminded of the the elephant and the six blind men story, right? Because you look at the elephant, it's very possible that you have six different people working on talent management, and they have a completely different take on what is talent management. They say this is talent management, oh, it's I'm hiring the right people, oh, I'm developing the talent into the right way, or I'm doing the making sure that people feel engaged, or I'm only generating what the job profiles are that our company should be having. Each of those practitioners would say that they are doing talent management, and possibly they might even say that the others are not. But the reality is that talent management is a very broad function. It's a very diverse function, so it touches many different ways to the organizations. One specific way that I saw, and this came to, and I've often pondered it. Why is this? Why does this have to do with COVID at all? And I'm really open to ideas. I'm open to be enlightened on why that is the case. But the question came to us around 20. This is really during the COVID time that we saw our career planner that we had in BizMerlinHR. There's a module called Career Planner, which allows you to create your career pathways, sort of self-assess them, as well as people to visualize them. So what we observed was that this module's usage really went through the roof. This was the fastest growing module. Everybody was just like, oh, we needed this and we need this. How do we implement it right away? And luckily it's a very easy module for people to usually to implement. It can infer a lot of data. It can produce the career plans already. And then you can sort of tweak them and say, yes, these are good to go. You publish them. And I'm still puzzled to this day. What does this have to do with COVID? What did this? And my best guess, and like I said, I'm open to being enlightened, but my best guess is that this started happening because people were no longer having their water cooler moments. So at the water cooler, they would be able to ask somebody, hey, what really, how do you think I'm doing? But when they ask, how do you think I'm doing? Under an undercurrent to that is, hey, what can I aspire to be in a year? Where can I go from here, right? And they were no longer having those conversations. So because they're no longer having those very informal conversations, and if you're on a Zoom call with your manager or your managing manager, maybe you don't feel comfortable just asking that question, as when you're just walking to them with coffee. Okay, now coffee station is in the east wing, so you're gonna go through the hallway, and in the hallway you're gonna talk about, okay, how was your daughter's tennis class, and what do you think I can be? And you kind of, the way humans talk, we kind of mix these conversations up. We talk about this, we talk about that, then we sneak in this question, we have something else. So that informal environment allowed us to ask many questions, which after
no longer being asked.
We're no longer being asked, and therefore there was a sudden requirement from the HR system, say, hey, this is my career plan, this is what I can aspire to be, this is my.
You see, my immediate thought was a bit different. Like, I was thinking, just in my personal perspective, coming into something like a pandemic, which most of us have never experienced before. And I think for me, there's this perspective of how quick life actually goes by, and maybe even this perspective of the preciousness of it, and introspection of what am I doing with mine. And perhaps there was just this motivation to grow, to do. Now is when, right? And then also I think that combined with this realization of just everything being forced upon us, of everyone simultaneously having to be adaptable and agile and bringing in technology, and just realizing that, okay, now is when, and whether I believed it before or not, it seems as though I can do this. And so perhaps that just motivated the spirit of exploration in people as well. And this, what am I waiting for kind of mentality.
I think you're really onto something. When we originally talked to people, there was also this question of maybe people are just much more aware of what they, that their time is, our time is always ticking. Sometimes maybe we can become a little bit complacent about it, but the time's always ticking. And maybe the pandemic really made them realize, hey, this is, nothing is for granted. we need to make the things happen now
Mhm,
so I
mhm.
can make the most of it. So I think you're really, maybe you're onto, maybe it's more than the water cooler. It's that, and maybe it's both, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's both. But it's really, it really, for me, coming from sometimes from a scientific mindset, you always are thinking this observation, and you want to understand what explains this thing, right? It's always like, hey, what happened now that suddenly changed this thing? And that was at least my take of it. So I think that may be a good answer that you have there.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about your application at BizMerlinHR, all of the facets of what your technology is able to accomplish for companies. And you touched on this a bit, this cycle and all the different components that talent management is, and this question of, does it really start at talent acquisition? And what else is involved, and maybe how are legacy applicant tracking systems keeping up or not keeping up, and what are all the other components that are kind of involved here with your tech?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think where today maybe is the day of we are making all these observations. I'm going to have a lot of work to try to uncover the reasons of it. But first of all, I mean, you're absolutely right that the talent management is just very broad, like you said, right? So talent management, I mean, even the term, if people recall, this is term basically, I think, came up by those management consulting company McKinsey back in maybe late 90s. I don't remember the year.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the term itself might actually even ruffle feathers these days, right?
Oh, yeah. But it consists of, but the objective of it remained the same throughout, right? You are basically have your, what used to be called human resources. Now talent management is a big part of it, but the objective remains the same, that you have the people who are going to be doing good work with you together with the company, and then you want to make sure that that work is in alignment with the company's broader objectives. I mean, they could be doing great work, but then if it's not aligned with the company objectives, you're not going to make the most of it, and then you're not going to be able to make the most of it from back to them. And this might be a sidebar, but this is often a thing that keeps me up at night, that as a leader, you always have the obligation of making sure that the employees, as the team members, they're having the most amount of fun, and they're learning the most, and they're contributing the most, so they can feel, from that Maslow's hierarchy perspective, they can feel the self-actualization, that, hey, yes, I did this thing. So you don't want to just maximize one thing, that you did the most work or you had the most fun or something, but you want to look at it in its entirety, that, okay, this together, so from a leader's perspective, you think that, but then also from a talent management perspective, you have the same exact obligations that the company that's using. So when I think from a vendor perspective, from a partner perspective, what I often think is that the customers that are using the BizMerlin HR system, they ought to be making it the best. It should be the best talent management function for them, so they're able to acquire, they're able to onboard, they're able to manage, they're able to develop, they're able to retain all the people that they have, and the people are able to do the best work. And then at the bottom of that, in horizontal layer to that, you actually have to be, there's a whole aspect of strategic planning to it, because you can't do all of these things if you didn't really create a strategic plan for it. So one way, and I think your question maybe touched upon this thing on talent acquisition, because many times people will say, okay, talent management obviously cannot start before you know a candidate, right? So if let's suppose I'm a candidate trying to join your wonderful show, then you're going to interview me as a candidate, saying, hey, we are very fun loving people, we do this thing, we do this thing, and you're going to try to assess that, hey, is this person a right fit? Are we going to be able to work with the person? So in a way, you can say that, yes, your talent management is only going to start when you interact with a person, because while I was not here, while I didn't show up, how can you have talent management? But in reality, what happens is that the minute I saw your job post, that already I'm interacting with you indirectly. Or the minute you started putting the items about your show on the universe here, I'm interacting with you. whether as a candidate or as a consumer, and for me to have an authentic picture about you and what you do, and that's already I'm interacting with it. So that's the reason, and the strategic planning part that I mentioned brought me here to this strand of the conversation, because that's really where it all begins. It doesn't in a way start when the candidate comes in the door. Your talent management started having its effect, whether good or bad, much earlier than that. When when you created your plan, hey, these are the kind of people we need to do, and this is what our show should be about. When you did that, your talent management is already taking some effect. And when we look at the BizMerlin HR system for our customers, we aspire that it's able to do the entire life cycle well before a candidate even comes into the door. Of course,
Yeah.
once you have the candidate, then you're going to onboard, then you have to be able to maintain all the records that the candidate maintains, do the performance reviews,
Yes,
and
and the complexity of this, like what you mentioned earlier, like candidates and the interaction before and during, and how COVID even accelerated the remote workforce, the global workforce, making it much more accessible, and in some ways probably even necessary for even smaller companies, which I think leads to actually an audience question that we've got coming in, and this global component.
Yeah, the question is from Antonio Osuna. Hello, Antonio. Hi, loving the talk. How does BizMerlin HR work in countries outside the United States? I live in Mexico and we have some intricate, is that how you pronounce it, Kip? Intricate? Yeah, processes to follow.
Yeah, intricate.
First of all, hola, Antonio. So this is exactly like when we I might have mentioned right at the beginning of the talk, but when we started BizMerlin HR, this was exactly what we came to. A lot of our customers are the companies in this segment who are might have 200 people in Mexico, another 100 people in Singapore, a couple of hundred people maybe in the US. So they have different processes they need to follow. So one of the hallmarks of any global HR system like BizMerlin HR is that you have a level of configurability that is virtually unparalleled. So you can do your own, you'll have your workflows. By workflows we mean a myriad of things like your onboarding, the offboardings, the promotions, the people changing departments, people just simply moving, or people changing their job type from becoming a contractor to an employee, or vice versa, or people's fundamentally changing what their relationship with the company by saying, yeah, I'm no longer going to be a software developer, but I like the company, so I'm going to become this here in the finance division. So all the kind of things that go through. So you have your workflows that are, you can configure it that, in Mexico, you have to follow a different process. Maybe in Croatia, you do something different. In UK, you have to do something else. So that'll be all separate. And also you have maybe entirely different things that you track for. Many times we have this fun, we use this fun anecdote that many the US-centric HR systems, they are often stumped right at the moment somebody doesn't have in social. They're like, what? How come? Like, no, there are other countries and they have their own numbers, and there is just a totally different. So once you start with a global mindset, these problems are not problems. Rather, these are just core aspects or the core features of the system that you look at.
And just the empowerment. And I think the ease of that, my assumption is that BizMerlin HR has done a lot of that heavy lifting, the hard work to make sure that everyone's compliant, and it just makes things smoother and faster without having to research or stress or worry about whether you got it correct or not.
Exactly. And then you use the great word empowerment. Empowerment is a very suitable word in the following context here, that in BizMerlin HR, many times you can say that, hey, after all, we have one global brand, this one global company, but we do have an office here, let's suppose in Colombia. So in Colombia, we do have to follow the separate process there, which the HR Colombia will help us in managing that part. But they can be empowered, and yet they're part of the integrated HR process. So that means it's not like, oh, you don't want it to be siloed. Okay, you just do your thing. And you don't want it to be a single process either, because a single process doesn't work for global companies. So the whole idea is that you want to integrate the people, because ultimately that's the whole objective of your HR system. Otherwise, what is it there for? So you have to integrate. At the same time, you have to empower the local authorities, in this case the local the local administrators, the HR people, saying, hey, in this case we also need these documents, we do this thing. And the HR system then allows you to do that. In BizMerlinHR, you can create phases in the workflows that are being managed by specific entities. So you still have a consistent picture. So later on, when somebody says, hey, Antonio joined this great company, did Antonio go through? You say, yes, well, Antonio went through the global process and then also the Mexico specific process, and then back to maybe some other global processes, such as learning about this or training about the product, whatever it is. So that's exactly how you go through that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Arora, we could be talking forever and ever, and we've actually come to the end of our 30 minutes. I cannot believe that it has flown so quickly. I did have one final question for you, and I don't know if it was about a week ago. Recently, I watched a little clip on Facebook, a quote of Simon Sinek. I believe we're all kind of familiar with who he is, and he was talking to how right now it's kind of the employees world, and there's a lot of kind of turnover and this ability to sort of jump from one company to another, and how that's putting stress on talent management in terms of retention, but also that the potential that this might have on the employees themselves, and what that means for potential hireability in the future, or even the ability to gain experience. If maybe you have 5 years of experience, but if you've only established, several months from one business or one company moving on to another, it's really not, 5 years of experience. And I'm wondering your take on that current element of what's happening in terms of, let's call it a great resignation. And is that a good thing? Is that a neutral thing? Is that a positive thing? And how might Biz HR or companies like you play a part in this?
Yeah. If I go back to my professor days, when we have a very difficult question come up, we just say, well, that's a great question. What do you think, America? So
Cred.
I'm not the doctor.
Pass the hot potato.
So I remember Simon's similar talk, maybe not that one exactly, but a similar talk where one of the questions, I think maybe is touching upon the same topic there, is that sometimes people come into it, and maybe he was referring to millennials in that specific segment there. But the question came that millennials, somebody joins the company, and then after 8 months, they feel, oh, they're not making an impact, right? But in reality, sometimes that much time is not sufficient for them to even fully understand what the company can do. Maybe that much time is sufficient for them to what the company does. They can understand what the company does. They can understand what their role is within the company. But that much time sometimes is not sufficient to see, now that they know all that, where can they actually make the most impact, right?
Yeah, actually, to your point, I think now that you're mentioning this, it is something that I remember him talking about this, also this idea of pay. Like, hey, I'm doing the same job as this person who's been here for 10 years or whatever. I would like to earn the same amount of money. And he's right. But then he says something about, they've been here for 10 years. You've been here for, let's say, 8 months under these conditions. And I know that these people know how to weather the storm. I don't know that you know that yet, but I know that when a storm comes, they're going to have the experience to be able to help you weather it too. And I think that was a fair point.
That's a wonderful addition. I would not have remembered to catch that, but I think it's a very valuable addition there. So now going to the heart of your question there, I know there's 2 big terms kind of floating around: the great resignation and the quiet quitting. This is pretty much all over the HR verse these days. But I will mention, see, the great resignation, and also this tight labor market. One time I was challenged at a talk, and I love when people challenge me straight up. They said, hey, everything that you're talking about COVID, this was about a year ago. They said that everything that you're talking about COVID, are you sure it's related to COVID and not related to the very tight labor market? And I addressed that straight up to them. I said, you're absolutely right. We do not know. That's exactly as a scientific mind. You make the observation, you're trying to see what's causing it, but you're not sure. So exactly, we're not 100% sure if everything we saw came because of the COVID, or was because such a tight labor market that people actually had the chance to being moving around all the time, and they were constantly being given offers, etc. So you're right. I mean, all these factors are playing into it. But the last part that you mentioned is probably the most important part here. That as part of the talent management, that soft skill that you mentioned, and you called it, I'm going to phrase it exactly, as weathering the storm. I mean, it's a killer soft skill to have. And maybe in the initial time, you don't know, maybe somebody knows exactly how to program the same way. Somebody can't, but they don't know, but you don't know whether they know how to weather the storm. And when the going is going to get really tough, how are they going to handle it? So again, that's the reason I love this entire field of talent management and HR. Those are all the constant challenges that we keep coming up with and having to confront those every day. So.
And creating great software to help companies do the confronting, right? And building the armory, so to speak.
And then the benefit of that, what my end result is, that where I take great comfort and satisfaction is when the CHRs tell me that, hey, this was a very good year for us. We were able to do this thing, and thanks to your software. And I say those words ultimately mean so much more to me, and I'm sure people like me, that this is really the end reward that we get to reap.
The purpose. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Arora, again, for joining us with BizMerlinHR. That is a wrap, folks, here on Dojo Live, the one and only, and what a great show to have for this week. Join us next week, however, on Monday for our recap show, and we do have 3 full shows for you next week lined up. So yeah, don't miss it. We've got Manuela Zonenstein from CEO at Kadaya. We also have Arthur Kane, VP of Product at Good Access. And we have Ajuna, I believe, on Monday. So catch us on Tuesday. So catch us on Monday, 10 o'clock Pacific for our recap show, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for our live shows. And everyone else, stay safe until then. Thank you again, Dr. Arora, and see you later.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, America. Great show as always. You guys are the best.
Thank you.